Okay, our topic is which zodiac, tropical or sidereal, is correct. Several people have asked me to make some comments about this. There are some astrologers who are strongly claiming that the sidereal zodiac is correct, the tropical zodiac is a big mistake, and is this true? So I'm going to answer that question, and it's related to another question of what was the original zodiac? Was the original zodiac tropical or sidereal? So I'm going to answer these questions. First, a few preliminary comments. In other tutorial videos, I mentioned that there are three zodiacs. There's the idea of constellational zodiac, where the constellation Aries is Aries, the constellation Taurus is Taurus, which is similar in some ways to the sidereal zodiac, but very different in that the sidereal zodiac consists of 12 signs, all of which are 30 degrees in length, and the constellations vary in size, there are gaps between them, they overlap, etc. I discussed that in other videos, and I'll give a link to that at the end of this video so that you can get more information about that if you're interested. And then there's the tropical zodiac, which is based on the solstices and equinoxes, which, in other words, is also based on the seasons and is not even close to being related to the constellations. Okay, so as I mentioned here at the bottom, I'm not going to give references to academic papers and primary sources in this video. The links to the videos that I give at the end of this tutorial video do mention that. So I'm just going to give you the information without backing it up with the references, because I do that in the other tutorial videos. Okay, point number one in answering this question, it depends on how far back in time you want to go. Between roughly the year 500 BC and the year 1, astrology went through a massive transformation. Before the year 500, astrology was mostly omens. It was not put in the form that we use now of character analysis and personality analysis and all the techniques of progressions and solar arc directions and primary directions and all these fancy methods. We don't have evidence that that was used. There were simpler, more direct statements of that are omens. If this particular thing is happening in the sky, then you're going to get this result. And then after about 500 BC, astrology developed into a more intricate system. If you go back before 500 BC into what's often referred to as the Babylonian period of astrology, which is a huge period of time, roughly 3000 BC to 500 BC, that's 2,500 years. That's as long as the period from 500 BC to now. During that huge time period, the evidence from works such as the Mul.Apin, which is a star catalog, which was compiled around the year 1000 BC, is that the astrology during that huge time period was primarily constellational. People looked at where the stars were and made predictions of what would happen based on that. And also, as I mentioned in this bottom paragraph, the precession of the equinoxes, which is a measurement of how much the sidereal zodiac and the tropical zodiac are separated from each other and how they move away from each other by about 1 degree every 72 years. That discovery is credited to Hipparchus around 150 BC. So in that time period before 500 BC, there is no evidence that they knew about precession of the equinoxes or knew how fast it moved and so on. And the little bit of information that we have from primary sources like the Mul.Apin doesn't suggest anything about the tropical zodiac. So the conclusion is that the ancient astrology, meaning Babylonian, was constellational. So those astrologers who claim that the original astrology is constellational are correct. It is. But it depends on what you call astrology, because astrology becomes so radically different after 500 BC. And if you want to refer to astrology after it underwent this huge transformation, then at that point, after the transformation, constellations are not emphasized as much. And the person who has the biggest influence on later generations, right up to now, is Ptolemy. Ptolemy wrote his very famous work, now known as the Tetrabiblos. And in the Tetrabiblos, Ptolemy states that he uses the tropical zodiac. And what some people get wrong about this story is that Ptolemy was fully aware of the precession of the equinoxes, and he understood the difference between the sidereal and tropical zodiac. And some people say he didn't, it was a coincidence, he was all confused, he was muddled, he didn't know what he was doing. The tropical and the sidereal zodiac happened to coincide during Ptolemy's time, which is true, they were nearly identical. But Ptolemy knew what he was doing, and in the videos that I have links to at the end of this tutorial video, have quotes from Ptolemy that demonstrate that he knew this, and he mentions precession of the equinoxes in another one of his books. Okay, so here's where this gets complicated. When we say the original astrology, do we mean the original astrology as far as has been passed down to us? Then yes, it's constellational. But do we mean astrology after it underwent this transformation after 500 BC? Well, if we're referring to astrology as we have inherited it from that period after 500 BC, then people were using both the tropical and the sidereal zodiacs. And in the later part of that period, such as with Ptolemy, they understood the difference and they had chosen the tropical zodiac. Okay, so here I have a summary of this. In the top paragraph I say, if we think of astrology as going back to the time of early Hellenistic astrology, that's the period from, very, very roughly 500 BC to the year 1. People are going to argue about the dates, but somewhere in that roughly that time period, we can state that the tropical zodiac and the sidereal zodiac are fundamental to astrology, and the constellations become relatively unimportant. If we think of astrology as going back to Babylonia, and that period of over 2,000 years prior to 500 BC, then we can state that constellational astrology is the original astrology. Now, whether Ptolemy derailed astrology or not is controversial. Some people are very strongly stating that Ptolemy messed up astrology. He introduced this tropical zodiac, confused everything. That may or may not be true, but if the true zodiac is based on constellations or sidereal rather than tropical, then what we have to face here is that Ptolemy did this consciously. He was fully aware of precession of equinoxes. It wasn't some muddled confusion that he didn't know what was going on. And as I mentioned here, I've got references to other videos that give sources to back up what I'm saying. Okay. Now, another important issue. Often we talk about constellations. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, are relatively large constellations. Another thing that was important through the Babylonian period and did get passed on to the Vedic astrology, the astrology of India, are smaller star groups, often referred to as asterisms. And asterisms are the basis of the nakshatras. And the nakshatras are extremely important in Vedic astrology. So nakshatras, therefore, reflect some of the thinking that goes back to Babylonia, the thinking that there are star groups that are very, very important. So we see some continuity from the Babylonian thinking emphasizing where the stars are, rather than the zodiac used in modern Western astrology, the tropical zodiac, this emphasis on star groups, which is the basis of the nakshatras, which are very important in Vedic astrology. Okay, so to summarize some key points. Astrologers who state that the original zodiac is not tropical, they are correct. If you go all the way back to Babylonia, it's correct. Point number 2, astrologers and non-astrologers who state that Ptolemy confused the tropical and sidereal zodiac and did not know the difference are incorrect. He did know the difference. Okay, so the bottom line is that both sides on this argument are correct. It's really a matter of how you think of it. When astronomers say that astrologers don't understand that their zodiac is anywhere from 23 to 30 degrees out of sync with the actual real zodiac, that's incorrect, because Ptolemy, who wrote this work, now known as the Tetrabiblos, understood that he was doing a tropical zodiac that's different from a sidereal zodiac, and that's been inherited. So it's not that the person who's had the greatest influence on this lineage of thought didn't know what was going on. He did know that there is a tropical zodiac which is different from a sidereal zodiac, and he felt for various reasons that the tropical zodiac was the preferred one. On the other hand, those astrologers who say that Ptolemy derailed astrology from the ancient Babylonian wisdom, they may be correct. Maybe that's true. How would we decide which zodiac, tropical or sidereal, is the correct one? 2 points about that. Number one, if you believe in the astrological ages, that we're going from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, you believe in both zodiacs. Because the ages are created by the relationship of the zodiacs, and it is possible that both zodiacs are correct. Some astrologers say that the tropical zodiac is more of a personality level, and the sidereal zodiac is more of a soul level. So it's not that one zodiac has to be correct and the other must be wrong. One may be correct, both may be correct and tell you different things about yourself, or both may be wrong. Maybe all these zodiacs are nonsense. How would we decide? Well, I don't think we're going to decide by saying who was first. What's first isn't necessarily best, or some a priori philosophical assumption. I think that the ultimate way to decide anything in astrology, whether it's zodiacs or aspects, and keep in mind that aspects are not related to zodiacs at all. There are whole systems of astrology, such as cosmobiology, which emphasizes midpoint structures, where many cosmobiologists don't even use a zodiac. So don't confuse zodiac with astrology. Zodiac is one part of astrology. Now, if we're going to decide anything about whether a zodiac works, whether it's sidereal or tropical or anything in astrology works, my suggestion is that we need to use more controlled research and not just personal experience. So if you show a chart of a particular famous person and you say, oh, see how it fits this tropical zodiac, the sidereal zodiac is nonsense, and then a competing astrologer says, oh, look at this famous person, we can see obviously the sidereal zodiac is correct and the tropical zodiac is incorrect, and then people share their own experiences, which is good. I'm not against this. I think it's important. And they say tropical works for me, sidereal does not work, and the other person says sidereal works for me. And it's a lot of anecdotal evidence and personal experience, and I think controlled research, controlled studies are extremely important for resolving anything in astrology, and the method that I often recommend is extreme case sampling, and lots of my tutorial videos, for example, the videos on the meanings of zodiac signs, use extreme case sampling. So using extreme case sampling, I give some examples of how the tropical zodiac appears to work. It doesn't work, it does not work the way a lot of astrologers say it works, but there does seem to be some validity and usefulness to tropical signs as demonstrated by extreme case sampling. I recommend that those people who are strong proponents of the sidereal zodiac do the same thing. Run the software, select the sidereal zodiac, pick out the people of extreme emphasis on a particular sidereal sign, such as sun, moon, and a few other planets in that sidereal sign, and let the software pick out the people so that there's no selection bias. You're forced to analyze the charts that are found to be strongest in the zodiac sign, and see if you can make a reasonably good argument of exactly what the sidereal zodiac signs do. So that's my suggestion. I think this is my last... Oh no, my last slide here is the links to some other tutorial videos, one on the history of astrology and one on the Rig Veda and astrology, which presents the possibility that this transformation of astrology after the year 500 BC might be more of a revival of some ancient ideas more than an invention or discovery of new ideas. It's not that critically important for this whole discussion, but what is important is the first video on the history of astrology. If you want to pursue this topic of sidereal versus tropical astrology, I think having a sense of the history of astrology, if you haven't been studying it already, I highly recommend this first link to the video on the history of astrology as being helpful. Bottom line, who's right? Which zodiac is the oldest? Sidereal or tropical or constellation. The constellational is oldest, probably evolved into the sidereal, and the tropical came later. Was the tropical zodiac a confusion that people happened to get the tropical zodiac confused with the sidereal zodiac? No. Ptolemy is the person who had the huge effect on later astrology, and he was using the tropical zodiac. He was clearly conscious of the difference. He knew about precession of the equinoxes, etc. And which zodiac is better? Well, I'm not going to answer that question because I don't think anybody knows. Everybody has their own personal experience. Nobody has done a quantitative study that gives a measurable result showing that anything in astrology works. Some astrologers say that's not even the point of astrology, and astrology can't do that. So there are a lot of different views on this, but what I will say is I think controlled studies are important. Extreme case sampling is a kind of study that we can all do without a huge amount of resources, and you don't have to do fancy statistics, and it tremendously improves our ability to draw conclusions. And I have made some videos on the extreme case sampling studies we've done of zodiac signs, and I'll be making some more that indicate that tropical zodiac signs do work. Does that mean tropical astrology is better than sidereal astrology? No! Let's do some more research on sidereal astrology. Maybe the sidereal astrology works even better. Okay, so that's my response to this question. I've gotten a lot of questions recently asking me to share my point of view on this. So there it is, my friends. I hope that was helpful. Thank you for listening. God bless. Namaste.